Hello, everyone. This is Raquel Martin. If you have not already heard, the Black Unconscious will no longer be producing episodes. We've decided to end this project. However, I have a new podcast called Mind Your Mental that can be found anywhere you can find a podcast: iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Facebook. We also have an Instagram page. You can find us anywhere. There's also a link to my new podcast Instagram page on the Black Unconscious page. I am going to leave an episode here following this brief introduction. And if you like it, please subscribe to my new podcast. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful doing this project, but we've decided to move on to something else. I hope you enjoy it. This episode is about values. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mind Your Mental, a podcast that seeks to educate, empower, and uplift those seeking guidance through the monumental world of mental health. I'm your host, Raquel Martin, a PhD candidate in medical and clinical psychology. This podcast is not meant to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health clinician. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to the show. So, I'm your host, Raquel Martin, and today I wanted to focus our episode on values. So, values is something I talk about a lot with my patients, both like children, more so adolescents, and their family members, because values are things that drive your entire life, like your entire being, what you're going to do, sometimes who you're going to do it with, why you're going to do it, what you don't do, like all of that. So I thought it would be a really good jumping off point for the podcast. So again, I'm going to do a bunch of things with the podcast. A lot of some of the episodes are going to be about like skills with psychology that I think could be really helpful. Some episodes are going to be interviews with other mental health clinicians or other professionals that I think could be helpful. And on some episodes, I'm honestly just going to have some like chats, like sessions where I talk to my friends about different topics that I think could be helpful to have other people listen to the conversations and see like where different perspectives come in. So today I decided to focus on values. But before I go into that, I kind of wanted to talk a bit about like where this really stems from. So there is a therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. It's like this really unique psychological intervention that uses both acceptance and mindfulness strategies along with like commitment and behavior change strategies, right, to increase psychological flexibility. Like the main goal of this therapy is to accomplish psychological flexibility. And that just means contacting the present moment and being a fully conscious being. It's based on like what the situation affords. So having this flexibility is just a personality trait that describes the extent to which a person can cope with change in different situations, right? Like you want to have flexibility to deal with things that go your way, but also when things don't go your way, which is most of the time when our mental health needs to kick in, right? Like you don't need so much flexibility when like you just won Beyonce tickets and the lottery and a mansion and found the man of your dreams. You need this psychological flexibility when someone slammed two doors in a window in your face and you got to figure out what to do next. So that's like the main goal to achieve psychological flexibility. So there are some core principles when it comes to ACT therapy. So there's like cognitive diffusion, and I'm going to go over all of these like eventually in some sessions I'm so used to saying sessions, and some episodes because I think they're really helpful for people to know to go forward in their life. But just reviewing some of the basic ones, like, so there are 6 core principles: cognitive diffusion, acceptance, contact with the present moment, the observant self, committed action, and values. And today we're just going to focus on values. So like, what do you think of when you think of values? I am constantly hungry at this point, so I kind of think of value meals, which is awful, but and there's nothing wrong with that. But with this one, values are kind of just like a combination of things that drive our life, right? So it's not really a combination. There are things that drive our decisions, things that drive our choices, things that are basically the bedrock of who we are. And we live our lives according to these values. They kind of help you decide what is really important to you. in your life. And I think some values are learned. I think you get them from being around certain individuals, values that you have, and then values that you don't want to have as well. But then they change over time. I would say that my values that drive me as a person now at 30 are like nowhere near where my values were when I was younger. Thank God, because that would be absurd. Like, the goal is to change. And if I'm the same person at 30 that I was, honestly, even at 29, it was a bit of a waste of a year. Like, you always need to grow. The only thing constant in life is change, right? So there are things that really drive you forward as a person. So one of the reasons why I talk about this a lot with my patients is sometimes there's a disconnect between what the child wants in a session and what the parents want in a session, like the goals that they want them to achieve. And that's pretty common. You don't always have the same exact goals as parents as your children do. And I wouldn't expect you to, because children aren't thinking, a lot of times they don't play to the end of the tape. So the things that you want for them are the things that they probably don't even think about in that aspect. But one way that helps, an exercise that I do with the family, is to look at the values that everyone has. And it's a pretty easy exercise, honestly. Like, I have a bunch of cards and we align different values into different categories. So we talk about like what's important to you, what's very important to you, and what's not important to you at all. And some of the values on the cards are things like acceptance. So like to be accepted as you are, or adventure, to have new and exciting experiences, or like challenge, like it's important for you to take on difficult tasks and problems, or I don't know, dependability, like to be reliable and trustworthy. Like there's just those basic things. And it's always a very eye-opening experience for everyone, because sometimes parents think that their children have no values, but like to tap dance on their last nerve. And they're very surprised to see the things that are really important to them, and also the things that aren't important to them, and also the things that align with what their values are, right? Like they kind of get a picture of, okay, so everything I'm saying to this child is not like going in one ear and out the other. Like it's just, they do have some things that stick. Like if they put integrity as a value, that's something that parents always want to see, because integrity is pretty much a bedrock to make sure you're making the right decisions, right? So values are basically, they're just what we find meaningful in life. They're what you care about. They're what you consider to be important. But they're different for everybody, and they also change over time, and they should. So why is that helpful in therapy? Well, it really helps when it comes to achieving goals. Like if you are getting stuck on certain things and you really want to focus on how to make this decision, one thing to ask yourself is, how does this decision align with my values? Right? Like if my value is, let's do something extra. My value is integrity, and I am trying to decide whether or not to rob the person walking down the street. Well, robbing the person doesn't really align with that value. Now, granted, most of the time, it's not that easy of a choice. It's not that easy of a decision, because everything's a shade of gray. Nothing's black and white in life, like, period. Even black and white people, like, they're different hues of individuals. So it's not that easy. But you can see how sometimes that could be helpful for you. But sometimes it's difficult to even identify where your values are. Like, how do you know what your values are? Like, where do you start? Do you look at things that you've done? Do you look at things that you've chosen not to do? Do you, I don't know, look at where you are in life? Like, there's so many different ways to identify your values. So I always find it helpful to ask myself questions. Working with patients, we ask ourselves questions. We like ask open-ended questions, so you can kind of think about it more. Like, I'm not going to ask you, a yes or no question, because that doesn't really drive the conversation forward that much. I'm going to ask you something where you have to give me a little bit more, right? So when it comes down to values, some of the questions I'll ask are like, okay, so think of a person that you look up to, right? Think of a person that you respect. What do you think their values might be? Like, what do you think keeps them going? Like, first, why do you respect them? Do you respect them because they just have a whole lot of cash? Do you respect them because they seem like they treat their family well? Do you respect them because they seem like a hardworking individual? Like, what do you respect about them? And if it's any of those things, those can be values that you really appreciate. Being a hardworking individual, being caring with your friends and family. Honestly, even the cash, having a bunch of cash, that can be a value that someone has. I don't want to say superficial, but I think there are better values to have. But that's not for me to judge. I'm not going to make a judgment based off of that. But anything like that can be a value, right? Even if we're thinking about how far you've come in life, just think about, okay, so what are some things that you used to really enjoy doing? Okay. Are these things you still enjoy doing? Like, for example, I used to like partying a lot. It used to be fun doing that, spending all the time out, finding a cute outfit, standing outside in heels. So freaking ridiculous. Standing outside in heels, partying until they play the same song twice. Then it's time to going to church on Sunday, the very next day. That used to be fun to me. Now, I'm not doing any of that because it's not really necessary to do all that to have fun as much anymore for me. Now it's like brunch. Netflix just added a series that is bingeable and it has multiple seasons, and I've seen none of them. Find a good book and read it. FaceTime my friends, because my values have changed a bit. It's not really so much about like going out and being seen and dancing and stuff. It's about I can have that much fun talking to my friends on the phone about like what just happened on Love After Lockup, or I don't know, spending time with my husband. Things like that, because your values change over time. Like back in the day, I would not think about like staying in to watch Netflix. What? I'm not gonna stay in and watch Netflix. I feel like the aren't the like the Q's or the alphas or the sigmas of somebody having a party. We not gonna be watching TV, but that's not where I'm at anymore, right? Because we've grown, we've progressed. That's called growth. So the values are different, right? What are some other things you can ask yourself, like when we're thinking about progress? Because I like to focus on progress a lot in therapy. A lot of times, individuals come in and they think that they're at a dead end. They think that they're having something that's really difficult for them to process and they're never going to get out of it. But I like to focus on, this is a lot like what you're going through, but you have been able to get through stuff like this before. Let's talk about that. And when we're connecting that to values, think about a value that you have now that you didn't used to have. Kind of like what we just talked about before, but like how has that led your life forward? Like, has that value contributed to who you are now? Do you feel like you left that value behind and you miss it? Maybe that's something too. Maybe it's the fact that one of the things you used to value are time with family. And now you don't really have time to spend with your family because you're working so hard. And you notice that you're starting to feel more and more down because your support system isn't as, you don't get to link in with them as much, or they're not as supportive as they used to be. Maybe that's why we're in the situation that we're in now, where you're feeling down. But with therapy, the whole point is to take the time to think about those questions. And therapy is always going to be a great experience because we live life in such an abbreviated manner. Like, you text instead of call most of the time. You like heat up meals in the microwave. You like do things really quickly. Even Instagram, what is it, like a minute that you're allowed online? Like, we live life in such an abbreviated manner. But when it comes to therapy, the whole point is to slow that down. The whole point is for us to think about how we got here and think about how I'm going to help you get out of here. Because although therapy is amazing and it's a wonderful experience, I do not subscribe to the thought process that you're supposed to be in therapy every week for the rest of your life. My job is always to not have a job. My job is to help you come up with the coping skills and utilize those coping skills to transfer outside a session so that you can use them. Like, you don't want to have to see me all the time. You want to be able to take a difficult task and talk yourself through it yourself. Therapy is work, so it does get exhausting. But once you get the hang of it, you're able to do it yourself. So I always feel like I'm not supposed to be in a job. But with therapy, we do take the time to look at things like values. Another thing that can be important to look at is the fact that when values don't align with who you are as a person or who you want to be, it can be stressful for you. It can create a discomfort, and it can create a discomfort that leads to stress or some kind of mental health difficulty, right? Because when you think about it, values define how you treat yourself, how you treat others, how you make decisions, how you treat the world around you, and also how you spend your time. So if they are such an important part of your life, imagine how much of an impact it can have when you participate in something that does not align with those values, right? And an exercise that I often do with individuals who are having difficulties with their social support system, right, with their friends or their families, is not only talking about their values, but like, what's your perception of how your values align with the people around you? How do you feel like your values different? How do you feel like your values differ from those around you? Do you feel like you've outgrown some situations or some people, which can happen? And it can definitely happen on the road to achieving like a more positive mental health, because when everyone around you is like sick or toxic in some way, and you are too, you don't really notice the fact that they've been coughing and sneezing all this negative stuff for the past couple of years. But when you stop having these symptoms and you start to listen in, you realize that they're not really aligning with who you want to be or where you want to go. So sometimes the journey to achieving a more positive mental health means you have to leave some people along the way. But it also means that you can also gain some more salient relationships, or maybe help some people to achieve better mental health themselves, which, doesn't have to be your goal. But that's one way to think about some things when it has your support system. A lot of times I would say most times, it's difficult to let go of someone who has been in your life for a while, right? Like if you had a middle school friend or a high school friend, or I don't know, just a friend you had like a year ago. Like friends are friends. Like you need your support system. I'm a big advocate of having a good support system. I feel like every single like person in my life that I consider a friend is there for a reason. They contribute something to me. Because I think it's easy to have a bunch of acquaintances, but it's hard to maintain good friendships. And because friendships take so much time and energy, and rightfully so, I like to make sure that the people that I am friends with, that I have like some aspect of dedication to, right? So they contribute something to me, and I hope that I contribute something to their lives too. So I don't try to like have them be like fair weather friends and stuff like that. Like I take the term friend pretty seriously, but when you're around people and you feel like you've grown, it's so hard to mention that, right? Like how do you say, I don't want to be friends with you anymore? Like, and it sounds like something like a younger person, like a kid would say, like, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. You took my chocolate milk and now I hate your face. But you wouldn't say it based off of that reason, but it's so hard to do that. And I think it's because no one wants to hurt anyone's feelings. Of course not. Unless you're just like really malicious, and you should probably work on yourself if that's the case. But that was a judgmental statement, my bad. But no, not my bad. You shouldn't be a malicious person. You need to work on your life if you're that way. But it's hard to do. And it's also hard to acknowledge when you have outgrown that person. When I think some signs are you don't want to spend as much time with them. You find yourselves wanting to do different things. When you do go out with them, you're not having as much fun. You feel like the decisions they make are starting to get a bit absurd, and you just feel like they don't align with who you are anymore. And it's the worst when it's just like, well, you used to have fun doing this. Yeah, but that's not something I really value anymore. And then you start to feel pretty sucky about that. But it's also probably an extension of your growth, and you should feel proud about that. So I feel like if you are having a difficult time and with a friend or with a family member or with a spouse or something like that, any kind of partner, you might want to take a minute and see, like, when was the last time you were able to think about your values? And when was the last time you were able to think about, do their values align with yours? Like, also, another way to think about this is when you're identifying values that of a person that you aspire to be, not aspire to be. Well, yeah, actually, you can think of values of the person that you like want to be. Like, I always ask the magic wand question in therapy. Magic wand question is, if I waved a magic wand, right, and everything happened exactly how you wanted it to happen, every single issue was solved, what would that look like? Or if, like, in 6 months, someone asked you about therapy and you were like, oh, it worked out perfectly, how would you know it worked out? Like, what would you want to see? So that's the same thing you can ask with your values, right? Like, I may not be where I am, but I'm not where I used to be, and that's a blessing. But I also recognize that I want to go further, right? So you can think about, what are the values that you would like to live by versus the values that you currently live by. Where do you want to go in life? What do you want to do? And that doesn't just have to be like career aspects. Like, you can think of values in different situations, right? You can think about it in family relationships. What kind of relationships do you want to have with your family? What kind of mother, father, sister, daughter, aunt, uncle, son, what kind of person do you want to be? You can think about it in terms of physical well-being values. What kind of values do you want to have regarding your physical well-being? How do you want to look after yourself in this one body that we're given, right? You can think of it in terms of like marriage or couple or intimate relationships. What kind of husband, wife, partner do you want to be? What quality of relationship do you want to be a part of? Friendships, like, what sort of friend do you want to be? What sort of friends do you want to keep around you? How do you want to act towards your friends? When it comes to like employment, what kind of work is valuable to you? What qualities do you want to bring as an employee? What kind of work relationships would you want to build? Or like recreation. How do you want to enjoy yourself? Like, what really relaxes you? When are you most in like your zone? Like, you feeling like you're zhuzh, like the vibe around you is just so pleasant. When is that? Even like spirituality. So you can think about, what kind of relationship do you want with God? What kind of relationship do you want with nature? What kind of relationship do you want with earth? Like, what that can be, those can all be different aspects of spirituality. And then, like, a lot of people are in school, they're in training, or they're just trying to have some aspect of personal growth. How would you like to grow? What kind of skills do you want to develop? What kind of skills do you want to get rid of? Like, what would you like to know more about? Like, there's so many different categories of things that can like drive you forward. There's so many different domains. And I feel like identifying these things in yourself can really help you along the journey to achieving a much better mental health, because mental health isn't like a linear journey. Like, it's not. It's gonna be a bunch of zigzags. You're gonna lapse, you might relapse, you might step into a pothole, you might do something different, but you're still like on that path. You just have to work. And I think that values is a good place to start, because it's something that you can work on within yourself. You can have someone to help guide you. You can always work on this with a clinician. I'm always going to advocate for therapy. But I think it's also something that wouldn't be difficult for you to ask yourself, to like write in a journal, to write down. Like, what are the things you want? What are the things you have? How do your values differ from setting to setting? Which is a pretty good one, because sometimes you may find that you're more comfortable in one setting than another. Why is that? Like, what do you think about when it comes down to that? So, I just think that living according to your values identifying your values, first of all. So identifying your values, learning everything that you want to hold dear and everything that you don't, what's important to you, what's most important to you, and what's not important to you, can really help you in your everyday life. But that's all I have for you today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just want to remind everyone to just like be kind to yourself. I really hope you like the show. If you do, hit subscribe, leave a review. You can find me on iTunes, Spotify, Radio Public, TuneIn. We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page, which is Mind Your Mental Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please join us, me and all my personalities. Please join me for the next episode. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.